Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the channel. If you're new to Lorena's Labyrinth, I'm Anah Parreli, and of course I own and run Lorena's Labyrinth, which at this point in time is not doing a lot of work, except for the channel where I'm trying to give information to people as part of helping them to step into their power and to retain faith and hope for the future, regardless of any of the crises they may actually be facing. If you're a repeat visitor, I just want to say, look, thank you very much for your ongoing support. I truly appreciate it. I do invite people to make their comments, their thoughts. I'm open to all of them, whether they be what you perceive to be positive or negative. I just ask that you write your comments a little bit respectfully, even if you disagree, and it could be simply as, I disagree, this is not my experience, okay? But everybody's viewpoints are welcome, and it doesn't matter if you don't believe in angels, because the nature of the activities that I give to you, you're actually going to see changes in your life. At least that was my experience. Once I learned to call, that was when the miracles started to happen. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about Mihr, who is the angel of relationships, and she has an amazing role. And so let's get straight on to finding out about her. So the first thing to know about Mihr is actually her name is pronounced Mihr, but technically speaking as in mermaid. However, for some reason I still call her Mihr. It doesn't really matter what you call angels, because at the end of the day, it's about personalising the approach. If you've got another name for the angel of relationships, don't feel you need to change what you're doing. It's about being comfortable with what you're doing. But anyway, Mihr is the angel of relationships, and this includes friendships, intimate partners, love, and even divine mercy. Now, her goal is to bring people together in groups of 3 or more as part of furthering the interests of humanity, and also, of course, expansion of the soul and spirit. So we could say she's somewhat of a social architect, because for example, when you are attempting to manifest something in your life, be it love, romance, financial, money, housing, security, or whatever, the best results are not usually a solo journey. They're the consequence of teamwork. And even if it is a case of, prime example, just use something simple. You want to buy a house. Well, you've got to go and interact with the right person to come to you to find you the perfect house. They may know of the perfect house that you're seeking, or they might know the perfect builder or the perfect location or whatever. You can obviously follow your guidance to a certain level, but at the end of the day, we rely on input from other people that will work towards our advantage, I suppose, or to meet the desired outcome. It's not necessarily about being selfish. Okay, other instances, it's when people connect with other people as part of a shared interest, shall we say. They're combining talents as part of completing a project, if I can speak, and it's about making progress. So this is probably where that saying comes from, of people enter your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. Sometimes they come in, for example, like the perfect real estate agent or the perfect builder to help you through to that particular stage. And then other times they might be around for a more enduring project. And if you've got a lifelong passion or shared interest or goal, then the associations might end up, especially if they're humanitarian, they might be a longer term goal. But there are other times as well when the links and associations that we make, goodness, I'm struggling to speak this morning because it's definitely morning where I am. Basically, look, sometimes if we're looking for spiritual community or whatever, that might become a lifelong association with people. So before we get into how Mihr actually works, I think we'll give a little bit of background about the particular angelic order that she works with within the hierarchy. She is one of what is referred to as the lesser archangels, and from an auric perspective, they're smaller than the great archangels. The greater archangels, they have these really tall auras, if you're blessed with the gifts of clairvoyance, of course. But the other thing is too that while they're somewhat smaller of stature than these archangels, they're actually found in greater numbers. And if you're able to see them, like I say, if you have these gifts of clairvoyance, they've got very bright faces that are framed with long golden hair. And when they interact with humans, they're actually bestowing what we call the gift of purity. They have dark eyes, and these dark eyes are open to see deep within, and they convey the thought of, or the idea of the eternal to the recipient. Now, group relationships are the development of their bond with one another. This is what they actually do. They work as a team together, and they also play together as a team, I might add, because life, even as a spirit, is not all intense and no fun. Anyway, where I'm going with this is my suspicions are that the idea of the whirling dervish potentially comes from the lesser archangels, because they create vibration through dance and through dancing in circles. So if you're a happy and joyous person by nature, then it's most likely that you're working very closely with one of the lesser archangels. Can be music in your spirit, it can be within your circle of friends and family, and this activity is vital to your stability, in that life must have joy and it must have pleasure associated with it. It doesn't mean that there's no balance there. It just means that it's very important. It's part of the core personality and characteristics. Oh, I should point out before we move on to the next slide, of course, that whilst I put the images up of angels with feathers, their auras actually don't have feathers. They don't. If you're fortunate enough to be able to see them, they have an aura that is outlined with wings. Where the human aura is oval, egg-shaped, the angelic aura actually is more cylindrical, and it's got some winged points on it. Probably a little hard to visualize. Use your imagination or ask the guides to show you how, or what it looks like, or to direct and lead you to the place. But I like to use feathers as where I'm going, because it's part of conveying a very clear message about what that aura is. So whether we're consciously aware of it or not, we all need to have a spiritual community, whether it's faith-based or not. You know, we say the word spiritual and we think immediately of church. It doesn't have to be that. Our spiritual community is one that helps us to evolve and grow and develop in humanitarian concepts of empathy, understanding, compassion, and wisdom, if nothing else, okay? And we can all work individually with limited social interaction. We know this. But if we are solo operators, there's nothing to challenge our beliefs or our perceptions, and we can actually stagnate within our personal growth. But when we associate with others, the growth is stimulated and we can flourish, as can all of us, right? So we have an internal inner yearning or need to be on the path with others who've got similar aspirations, who can encourage us to keep on the path and to endure and face challenges with decorum, and to be able to rise above problems as we develop our own levels of personal self-mastery. Now, if you haven't found your spiritual community or soul pack yet, ask to be called to... Sorry, I just had to rethink that. Ask to be directed would be what I would say. Ask to be directed to your spiritual community, and be aware that while you might be thinking that you're looking, this is a prime example of how it works. You can put out and invoke, I call to be directed to a spiritual community, one that supports my growth X, Y, and Z. And you might think that you're actually trying to find the perfect meditation group or sit around meditating all day. But in fact, instinctively, you might be drawn towards a gardening group or something like that, and becoming part of a gardening community. Or replanting, or something with an environmental aspect to it. I mean, as with this image here, I think I like this image because we have... what do they call them? Groups here in Australia where we do the water clearing, and you get people going out and picking up the rubbish and the litter and that kind of thing. So it might appear at the first glance that actually the activity that you're drawn to is not particularly spiritual, but it's going to restore at some level your emotions. That would be the first instance. This is the way divine works. And then what happens when you're in these communities is you may actually meet somebody there who is a real mentor to you, through their own wisdom and knowledge. And the other thing is too, they might be a conduit to somebody else who does become your spiritual mentor, if you like, as far as universal workings go. And the other thing, as said, is because there is the social architecture involved with Mihr bringing people together, these might end up being the lifelong associations, the lasting ones, especially if they're associated with acts of human service. And the point to be made is when we talk about social architecture is when these communities come together, it is through the individuals bringing in their own ideas and thoughts and their energy and passion that these projects become successful, especially if, as I say, they're working towards the greater humanity. They energize this idea, and as a team, they I'm struggling for the words today. I can see it in my mind. This is one of those situations where you can see it in your mind, but trying to explain it is a little bit different. It's like, okay, if you put one rower in a boat, they're going to get to their destination. That's without a doubt, If you've got enough room for 4 rowers to get into it, they're going to get there far more quickly. And if they're in sync and they're going to move swift, they're going to move fast, it's going to be tidy. And this is basically what we're talking about with a good group. It gets results quickly or quicker. Within a really healthy spiritual community, people, including yourself, are going to feel inclined to give your all with love, truth, and caring and understanding. Now, family members, when we talk about spiritual community, family members, whether they're biological, adopted, or foster parents, they're rarely on the same spiritual path as we are for the entirety of the journey. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to disconnect from family, but rather acknowledge that the earthly unit, this family unit that we're born into, teaches us certain things about ourselves and about life, about our feelings. Each person in the family is influenced by their own individuality. That is, they've got their own desires and values, and they also have their own path to walk. Now, in my observations, what I do see quite often, excuse me as I swallow, is because I do numerology, I see repeating patterns in family units of numbers and the life path. So I would say that there is a shared element or aspect to the family unit as far as journeys go. And from a personal perspective, when you're born into a family unit and you experience perhaps challenges and family dysfunction, the numbers can actually reveal insights into what those experiences are meant to teach us. It's fabulous. But anyway, the spiritual community can become a form of a healthy family where it celebrates victories, successes, and other times might share comfort and togetherness, just offering support when things are not going so well. Now, you don't find this kind of family connection in a weekly meditation group either. You might find a member of your spiritual family or your soul pack in these smaller groups, though. So it may not have escaped your attention, but we live in crazy times and the family units are breaking down, okay? We see a lot of it, this family disconnect where it might be between the children against their parents or vice versa. And anyway, it's kind of like there's this permanency of turning their back on each other for whatever the reasons are. At this point in time, I'm not going to go into it. But basically what we're seeing here is really hard feelings between family members. And the consequence of that is that there is a lack of recognition, really, of the well, in fact, it's not just the lack of recognition, it's the fact that it's a lost opportunity to actually grow as an individual and a human being and as a soul through these family relationships, because they are the most precious of all the vehicles for growth. This is what I'm talking about, the family unit, the unit that we're born into. And this is even within dysfunction, because regardless of any harsh feelings that family members might have towards each other, the reality is that most family members have a really deep insight into the inner workings of our soul as individuals and our behaviours, and we might not be aware of them consciously. And the thing is, because we all become so layered, if you like, of what we show people, the boundaries of the truth of who we are, most of us walk around showing just one aspect of ourselves, but we don't show the world our vulnerabilities. Now, the thing with the family unit is they can see far deeper because they've known us through the course of our life. I mean, that can be problematic or it can be positive. So realistically, if we think about things, I know as a mother and a grandmother that I can look at my children and grandchildren, and somebody can turn around perhaps and say to me, for example, your child or your grandchild did X and Y. Well, the first thing is I actually don't jump straight to defense, but I learn to ask questions and carry out my investigations or whatever, especially if it's about bad behavior. I learned this a long time ago with my son, because he had tendency to think that he had the responsibility to serve justice, which was actually not true. But either way, there you go, prime example of it. I know within him that whatever actions he might take, his core personality traits are that he believes in fairness and justice. So he can become quite indignant, and his behaviours can become quite over the top if he feels that somebody is being a bully to somebody else. So that can create problems for him at different times. So the thing is, other people who perhaps are just meeting him for the first time, they're not going to know that this is a core personality trait for him. They will not also know that the problem for him, because he's got this core personality trait, is if somebody is a bully, he will flare back, because of course now he's a great big man, and so his response is to try and take justice into his own hands. There's a risk of him becoming a vigilante, shall we say. And so therefore, as a family member, I've got a healthy connection with him. So this is works well. But let's say if there was dysfunction because he was blaming me perhaps for not being the mother that he wanted or whatever, then there becomes that lost opportunity for me to actually turn around and say to him, let's say he was becoming too indignant towards somebody he perceived to be a bully, there's a risk here that you need to, or not you need, because no kid likes to be told that, especially if they're an adult. Have you considered the fact that if you keep on the path that you're going, that there is a real risk that you will be perceived to be the bully because you're using standover tactics over the bully? Never works, okay? That's a whole different subject for another day. But these are how family members can be catalysts for growth as well, and reflection. The beauty is actually that my son will actually go away and think about what I've said. I actually should make the point that whatever I say as a mother is met with a knee-jerk reaction of no, and I probably don't know what I'm talking about. But the fact of the matter is he will go away and reflect, and then he will come back and go, I have decided. And it's usually along the lines of what I might have suggested to him. But I've digressed here, okay, because the whole point, or the whole sacred business of the family unit, is because not only does it expand the sense of ourselves and our soul, is because there are opportunities to heal any dysfunction that we might be born into the world with. We can see intergenerational patterns of trauma when we don't heal the relationships of the family unit. Now, speaking about intergenerational trauma and being able to see the reflections of ourselves within the family unit, it's important to talk about the next thing. I found this particular message to be very helpful when I first heard about it, and so I hope that you will as well. It was extremely healing, and I actually will put up the techniques and strategy that I use to do it, probably in a separate video under the mental health section. But basically, the primary message is that when a child is born, it's designed to balance these male and feminine principles between their parents. Now, children are also attuned to the circumstances of their conception, and we actually know this now from neuropathy or studies of schemotherapy and this kind of thing. So, for instance, when a child is planned for or wanted or desired, it grows up in a space of knowing that it's a welcome part of the family unit, and the soul of the child will usually be agreeable and peaceable and even respectful. And these attributes will likely be reinforced by the parents, where they have a level of an emotional maturity as well. Children that were conceived as an accident or unplanned aren't necessarily unwelcome or undesired, but sometimes they are. And they will be attuned to their own conception, and they may struggle with feelings of rejection, lack of love, even the guilt of the parents if they were forced to marry to meet social expectations of giving birth to a child. Now, as a consequence, this child can reflect to the parents and family members the denial and conflict between the parents. Now, I want to make the point here, I put divine plan on here. I think it's helpful to understand that the divine plan includes because we have free will before we're born and after we're born, we become part of the planning. So whatever family unit we find ourselves in, that was something that we agreed to prior to conception to teach us specific lessons. So what we're saying is that family units, the earthly family unit, comes together for the perfect reasons. And when I say about lessons, it's not just about lessons, it's about experiences and being able to feel and experience certain things. So while we have earthly experiences of children, as I said, it's all part of the divine planning process. And the other aspect of this is when it comes to family dysfunction on the earth plane, many of the parents might feel guilt or conflicts around being a parent. They might not feel that they were good enough, they could have done or should have done better, or they should have done X, Y, and Z. And to actually process this is a waste of time and energy. And it can, in fact, become a barrier to their own capacity to connect to the divine, because all a parent can really do is the best that they can do at the time. Parents are also products of their own parents. And the own potential issues around conception as well. And this is how family breakdown is so detrimental to all of us, because it results in this repeating unconsciously and not in a deliberate way and without malice, the dysfunction of our own childhoods. So where I'm going with this is beating yourself up with shame over what you didn't do or what you think you could have done better is just not helpful. And part of the forgiveness process is not to be mistaken for a failure to recognise that perhaps we weren't the best parents in the textbook, but it's recognising we were the best parents that we could be at the time, and that at some level, if we trust the process of the divine plan, that we came together for the perfect reasons, which was either to develop certain traits within the child, certain traits within us. And I would go as far as to say that drawing upon my own experience, I did come from a family of trauma and dysfunction, and I like to think that I worked through a lot of it, but I think once your children reach maturity, then you become aware of your own failings, shall we say, and their own limitations. But at the same time, we only know what we know. And I also recall as a child having anger towards my own parents until I understood their journey, what they were born into, what their experiences were as a child, and how their parenting was a product of their life experiences at a time where they were not encouraged to reflect and to expand their thinking. They weren't even, in my parents' day, they weren't even encouraged to go and get parental support and on parenting techniques and that kind of thing. And for my parents' age group, the fact of the matter is the parents actually were emotionally absent because they were so busy working. But coming to the present, whether it's a case of the people are so busy working and this is why they're emotionally absent, or they simply don't have the skills to be able to be these positive parents and they're not aware of what they can do to become positive parents, the whole idea for today right now is to look at, is there a contact and a relationship, if we've got one, where there is a dysfunction within the family unit, it could be with siblings, is to look at and reflect on your own feelings and behaviour as part of healing family dysfunction. However, healing is never too late, okay? And if we want to heal family dysfunction, then we've got to start with ourselves. And the first thing we do when we're trying to heal ourselves is, one, if you're a parent, look at the conception, what was going on around the idea of you giving birth to your own children. You know, if they were planned and conceived in love, there's other issues that can impact on the family relationship over the long term. And that was what was happening in the environment. Was the relationship, you might have decided that you want to be pregnant, but then of course events happen, perhaps there's a job loss or whatever, there becomes relationship tension, there could be tension with the workplace and financial insecurity and other things that will impact on the mother during the gestational period. Then take a close look at yourself, asking questions, you know, what is it of your behaviours? What is it about you that they show you with their own actions. So, for instance, if you've got issues with your mother, what is your issue with your mother? Is it abandonment? Is it rejection? You can explore that, and then you look at it and you are able to go, okay, I can see where that comes from. You develop the process of empathy. Now, doesn't make it right. I'm just putting this clear. It doesn't make it right or comfortable is the correct terminology, but understanding is part of the healing process. Parenting, on the other hand, for yourself, if you talk about your own parenting with your own children, can be extremely difficult. And this is because we beat ourselves up as parents about our feelings. So the first thing is to understand it's not unusual at all for parents to be triggered into feelings of shame or rage because of the things that their children do. And sometimes, let's be real, sometimes this can even become hatred for some parents, hating their own children. Now, I know saying this is going to cause a knee-jerk reaction for some people hearing that and thinking, no, that doesn't happen. I've never hated my children. I have actually, through the course of my own work, heard parents say and feel terrible. They beat themselves up. Sometimes I actually feel hatred. When they are totally emotionally honest, they understand their feelings and the sensations. And so this is the thing. If we want to heal those relationships, what is the experience? What are the emotions that children are triggering within you? And do you pretend and fake love to your children, or do you resort to other negative actions such as trying to emotionally manipulate or abuse your children psychologically, sexually, or physically? This is all part of parenting. Obviously not the abuse, but it happens. Okay, so the idea is create the space to process your own emotions, because once you can be honest with yourself about how you feel, you can then empower yourself to start this process of change, and you can divert any of your destructive parenting actions to become positive and constructive healing expressions of love. Now, this is a real power. So when we step into this power, you can then begin the process of confronting your own children, if you're a parent, from the space of loving acceptance, and teach them how to embrace their own true feelings. And this is the way the family can fulfill this divine design of being a sacred tool and vehicle of awakening and expanded awareness. Now, I want to put a wee bit of a disclaimer on here, in as far as what we're talking about is a process for some people that can happen very quickly once we start this healing journey. But when we're talking about a family unit and a group, everybody's developing and healing at their own rate and pace. And the thing is, people with dysfunctions. Okay, so let's use my mother, for example. She's not going to watch this video, which is a good thing. My mother comes from dysfunction and intergenerational trauma without me telling her story. And as far as a mother goes, we have had conversations in the past that perhaps it's a bit lackluster, just to be kind about it. She didn't know how to be a mother for her own reasons, and therefore her maternal instincts were not that great, let's say. I'm trying to be subtle here. Talk about honesty. Okay, she wasn't really good at being a mother. That doesn't mean to say that she didn't try. She did. But I didn't feel that she was very good for a long time. So I had to heal my reactions to her, because I was judging her quite badly. And in some ways, I still do think that from a discernment perspective, she still is a bit lackluster. But at the end of the day, I understand now. I can forgive her for being the mother that she is. I can see that she actually means well. She's not a malicious person as a rule. But she certainly does have some very questionable traits. But because I understand her history, I know where she came from and all the rest of it, I can forgive her. I don't need to cut her off. I can speak with her. I can have conversations and interact with her these days without having a huge, massive reaction, because when she does stuff actually these days, rather than get upset and bent out of shape, I'm fully aware that this is her stuff, and I can have a bit of a laugh when I detach from her. So I'm like, oh my goodness me, there she goes again. But she is what she is. So I accept her for who and what she is. So the process of understanding and developing this empathy, and that starts by looking at life, I guess, from our own parents' perspective? What was going on for them at the time you were conceived? Do you know? Have you got any idea? That's the first question. And are you still behaving in ways that reflect the dysfunction of your family unit throughout your childhood? We all know that there's a role that each one of us play when we're in the little family groups. We've got the golden child. Quite often there's the golden child who might be the adult, the eldest child. And then, of course, you've got the youngest child of, generally speaking, we're talking about a dysfunctional family unit where the younger child, certain allowances are made for them because they're the baby, and the parents might try and hold on to that naive part of them or whatever and make excuses and allowances and justify bad behaviour because they're the baby. Perhaps your role was the black sheep in the family unit. You might have been the one that was the functional family member in a dysfunctional family unit, But the bottom line is, once we start exploring what was going on for us, then we start to forgive, because we get capacity to forgive through this understanding and compassion. It's a very powerful healing tool. It doesn't mean that whatever has happened is okay. And by okay, I mean it's not, forgiveness is not about justifying what they did and saying, yes, okay, it was fine for you to be abusive, I'm happy to be a victim. None of that. It's about recognizing and understanding that they also are products of their own conception, their own development, their own family childhoods. And if there's been family separation or whatever, there's a failure to address the traumas and actually heal it and stop it from going through to the next generations. And so where I'm going with this is, once we start this process of forgiveness, we actually activate the blessings, which are much like a miracle. The relationships start to improve, even with our own parents, and even if we haven't seen them for a long time. And if your parents have passed over, your personal feelings toward them will become less bitter. It will become more compassionate towards them. It might sound incredible at this point in time, but you certainly will start to find obvious changes in the way you think about them and the way, if they're still living, you interact with them. And if you've got siblings, you will notice changes there. That's, of course, if you're still connected to each other. It just becomes very different. It becomes very peaceful. And this is even if there is still conflict. So, for instance, if siblings are estranged from each other, you might yourself start to feel less estranged, if you like, or more compassionate towards them, even if the things that they have done are lacking in are not above scrutiny, shall we say. I'm just trying to think of ways to be diplomatic here. You might find yourself in a situation thinking, well, I have no desire to reconnect with them because I don't believe that they've actually changed and done their own reflections yet. But the way you think about them still might be a case of, you can accept and respect that right now your journeys are taking you in different directions, but they might actually reconnect at some point in the future in a divine way. But for now, of course, it's about having that compassion. I think a prime example, I will use a bit more of my own situation here as far as healing my own family units of dysfunction and looking at the reflections that they give to me. Sometimes the reflection and the lesson and the experience is actually purely, I believe, just to have understanding and to be able to forgive people and not carry that burden with you throughout the rest of your life. So I do have some sibling issues because we are a dysfunctional family. And I recall speaking to one of my siblings more recently about the dysfunction, and that there has been an estrangement between all of us siblings, actually, in different ways, shapes and forms. And I remember saying, I have no hard feelings towards one of my siblings that I haven't seen for about 25 years. I said, I actually understand exactly why it has come about. I can appreciate the difficulties for her throughout her childhood, and I can understand what there would have been about me, my character, my personality that would have actually created the justification in her mind for this estrangement, because actually she's the one that's got the door slammed on me. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that I'm wanting to catch up with her. But if I saw her in a public setting, perhaps if there was a family gathering or whatever, I certainly could be polite to her and pass the time of day. And who knows where that might lead? I can't say when that might happen, but this might be an experience that you can relate to or could look forward to as well. I'm very interested. Once again, I invite your comments. I distracted myself a little bit there through sharing my own experience, but basically the message, and I believe my experience backs this up, is that once we are able to embrace forgiveness, then there becomes the blessing of being able to evolve to being our adult self and living as an adult with adult maturity and to resolve the childhood pain. And that is a true blessing. So, another thing about family, which I find to be very interesting, and the earlier we learn these lessons and understandings, I think the better for all of us as a society. This lesson of forgiveness, if you like, especially towards family members, because it's only over the passage of time, really, through this wisdom and maturity, that we're actually able to expand the mind and bring this forgiveness in. Not for, for some people it doesn't take a long time, for others it might take longer. And I recall having a conversation between my mother and her brother, and they were actually discussing my nana, and so were actually their partners, my father and my aunt as well. And they were all talking about the fact that my nana apparently had some what would be called undesirable characteristics as far as her children and the in-laws were concerned. Now, I made the point and I said, I find it so bizarre, and I'm nearly 60. I find it so bizarre hearing you guys talk about my nana in this way, because that is not a memory I have of her. To me, she was the most beautiful, softest, gentlest, kindest person. And to try and relate my memory of her with their memory of her, it just seems poles apart, literally. And my uncle turned around, he said, and the funniest thing to us is, he said that every single one of her grandchildren has this same memory of her, of being this very soft and gentle, beautiful person. He said, but she was actually a very strong, very hard woman as a mother. And so anyway, I think that's just an interesting thing to point out there, because the thing is too, that when we decide to split the family rather than face the trauma and open up to communication and resolve differences, there become all of these lost opportunities, not only to break the pattern of intergenerational trauma, but also for the children to have these solid, beautiful memories of who and what their nana is, or their grandparents. The reality is there is going to be different experiences, whether you're the parent and the child, whether you're the grandparent and the grandchild, these kind of things. But anyway, the advice of Mihr is to choose to be alert to seeking out the special relationships, whether they're in the family, at work, at home, if they're your housemates. Be alert to seeing them, and being alert, choose to be alert to activities that you're passionate about, because this could be your charity work, and it could even be environmental activities that bring you into contact with these people that are going to be part of your wider spiritual community. And all things being well, if you are not able to walk the path of life right now with your family that you were born into, or your biological family, adoptive family, foster family, or whatever, you can create a type of spiritual family here on earth. So many relationships that we will have on the earth plane when we meet these people, to a large extent, they're preordained or predestined, but they're only ever going to occur if both parties are willing and determined to pursue and follow their own divine path and develop themselves. And, if we're talking about this spiritual community for the greater good type activities, these people also have got to the point of having humanitarian consciousness. So it's a matter of being alert, recognizing that everybody's on their own journey. Everything happens at the divine time, in the divine way. But until that happens, and all the way along the path, we have opportunities to break the old dysfunctional patterns. Mihr's key message is, if you have not found your spiritual family yet, or your spiritual community, create your own. So if you're looking to create your own, or simply to enhance the conditions of your own family life or community, There's a couple of invocation suggestions here. Because this has become a long video, I'm not going to run right into it. I'm just going to remind you there is an invocation technique and strategy. Call upon the Creator first, then the Angel Mihr, and also include your guardian angel. Don't forget to finish up with gratitude, though. Sincere and heartfelt thanks, they always pave the way for even more blessings. It really does, from an energetic capacity, need to be part of our daily ritual or when we're doing invocation. Now, I will say that initially when we start doing invocation, it may feel shallow and hollow, and this is one of those occasions where I would say if you don't actually feel this genuine heartfelt gratitude to the angels for giving you these blessings that you're asking for in advance, in the knowledge that you know that as you ask you will receive, this is a time to fake it until you make it. And it's okay to fake it until you make it in this context, because as you go through the process, you will get to the point where you genuinely do feel sincere thanks. Now, from my perspective as well, what I have done, because at different times I don't sincerely feel grateful, sometimes I still struggle with that from time to time, but what I do is I just have a conversation on the side and say, look, it's like talking to a human, really. Look, I know that this sounds a bit hollow, and I'm sorry about that, but I am working towards having sincere and genuine gratitude. You can do things like that because the angels are more than willing to oblige and to help us to become the best version of ourselves. And I say that sounds a little bit hollow too, but it actually is the truth. So anyway, yes, gratitude is a key. It's one of the ascension attitudes. And while we practice it, when we first start, it might feel a bit unnatural, but the more we practice it, it becomes cemented in our sense of self. So, my friends, with all that in mind, I wish you well. Have a blessed day. Take care. I hope that the information I've been able to give you today has been beneficial to you. This is actually a subject that I could talk about in so many different ways, but of course, we're limited to time. And so I have to, for today, focus on the information that I have about or from Mihr. But I also have experiences of interacting with people and my own personal observations, having worked in the mental health field. And I would love to talk about this further, but I can't for today. So in the meantime, I'm going to say love you, leave you, have a wonderful day. Take care of yourselves. I will catch you on the next video. Bye-bye for now.